Well, hello my little beauties, it's David Connolly here with a little presentation for you. I'll try and be as fast as I can. This one is called If Steve Jobs Was in Charge of the PHP Foundation. Now, I forgive my shoddy editing. I'm on another computer here and I'm away from home actually, so you'll see me nipping about between screens like this and it's not very professional, but I'll do the best I can. So, PHP is on life support. I'm not going to say PHP is dying, but it's in a pretty precarious place. Have I got your attention? Good. Because I want to offer a few thoughts, if I may. And everything you're going to be getting here is pretty much a response to the Voices of the Elephant podcast, where they published an interview with the PHP Foundation. For anyone who doesn't know me, I am David Connolly, the web developer extraordinaire. I've used PHP since 2003, commercially, not as a teacher guy. Mind you, I do have a little course called Speed Coding Academy, and I happen to be the founder of a framework by the name of Trongate, a PHP framework that I made with the help of some of my good friends. And that's pretty much me. Unfortunately, I don't know anything about the C programming language, and I'm most definitely not a core member of the PHP team. And it would appear that PHP has some challenges, so I'm going to spend just a moment, if I may, discussing those challenges and just making my own listeners aware of what's going on. And then I'm going to go on a little journey, and I'm going to invite you to come with me as we speculate, as I fumble around with my microphone, as we speculate on what Steve Jobs would do if he was in charge of the PHP Foundation. This is not my own opinion, and I've swapped myself face with his. I have actually done some honest research here, and there are one or two areas where if I'm being entirely honest, I would have personally gone a different direction. And I'll let you know what those areas are when we get there. But as much as I possibly can, I'm going to back this up with real historical data, because back in 1997, Apple was in a really, really bad place, and they called upon Steve Jobs, and Steve Jobs saved Apple. We're going to be looking at some of the things that Steve Jobs did, some of the ideas, principles, and strategies, and together we're going to speculate on how we could potentially apply some of these ideas to PHP. Fair enough? Okay, so let's talk about the challenge. Now, a few months ago, I said something in this very channel which nobody really picked up on, but it was kind of a bold move. I said at the time that the PHP JIT compiler is fantastic. The only thing is, nobody knows how it works. Now, at the time, I said that based on a little bit of searching around the web and stuff, and it became clear to me that nobody was able to accurately describe what this thing does or how it works. Now, please, there's somebody typing in the definition of a JIT compiler. We're not talking about that, right? We're talking about how does PHP 8's JIT compiler work? And I said about 6 months ago that I don't think anybody knows. Now, based on this Voices of the Elephant interview, it would appear that this declaration is another one for the David was right file. Because it would appear that PHP has been getting looked after by a person that most of us would not have heard of. I did not hear of, by the name of, I believe it's Nikita Popov. Now, forgive me if I'm a bit slow with the pronunciation, but I only heard about this person recently. And it turns out that Nikita Popov has been one of the main, perhaps the main, contributor of PHP in recent years. And there are a few parts of PHP that, unless I'm very much mistaken, he made. And the sad news is that, unfortunately, Popov is leaving. He's leaving. He's moving on to other things. If you look at the screen here, we have a little article. It says he started working on PHP in 2011, and he's had 10 years. He's implemented innumerable features. By the way, I apologize if I get one or two things technically wrong here. This is all new to me, so I'm not claiming to be an expert on this side of things. The core team of PHP do a really good job of keeping quiet, and we don't actually hear about them too much. But in any event, he has been a contributor to Rust and LLVM. And would you like to know a confession? I don't have a clue what LLVM is. It's terrible, right? Let's see if I can find that out. LLVM, a compiler infrastructure project. Right, okay, so that's all I need to know. Clearly the dude is a prodigy. I won't use the word genius. Those words are reserved for people like Einstein and all of that. Maybe he is a genius, but certainly this Nikita, and I believe even one or two others, are really, really great at what they do. And they have been good enough to contribute to PHP over the years. Now, unfortunately, Nikita is leaving and will spend significantly less time on PHP. Thanks a lot. And so what has happened is, after numerous conversations with members of the community, as well as a number of companies that have vested interest in PHP, well, they're now going to form a PHP Foundation. And some of the people on board with this include Laravel, Zen, Symfony, PrestaShop, JetBrains, and others. Now, it says that the goal of the foundation, and it's not entirely in front of me here, but I listened to the interview, but the goal of the foundation is effectively to secure the future of PHP by gathering funds so that those funds can be used to hire good programmers, specifically programmers who know the C language inside out, because that's how PHP was made. And so the goal of the foundation is, well, please donate, and we will use that to find and hire people who have the type of expertise that we need to move PHP forward. That is really the beginning, middle, and end of this foundation, as far as I can tell. I'm sure I heard somewhere, again, please take this with a grain of salt, but I'm sure I heard somewhere that Laravel had donated $100,000 to the foundation. If that's true, then it really shows you how seriously people are taking this. Now, I don't want to be sensational seeking or add any drama where we don't need any drama, but I think it's safe to say that PHP is on the ropes here, because if we don't have people who even know how it was made, and if we don't move forward with PHP, then it's not looking good for the future. So anyway, that's pretty much everything that I know about the foundation, and I hope I managed to get that as accurate as possible. Hello, little Blackie. I have a wee friend in here who's joining me. So now I want to turn my attention to the question, what would Steve Jobs do if he was in charge of this foundation? Well, remember I was saying that this is not me, okay? If it was me, I would say don't give me any donations. I would say don't take in any money. I would say that if we can create a buzz and an excitement about PHP, then great talent will appear. They'll be queuing round the street and it won't be a problem. But hey, that's me, and you're not interested in me. So let's talk about Steve Jobs then. What would he do? Well, if we go back to 1997, one of the very, very first things that Steve Jobs did, and in fact he spoke about this at his Think Different. Now, this was not the one, but he spoke about this at Steve Jobs. One moment. It was the Think Different launch. It was right here. And the man himself says that when he returned to Apple, here we are. Do a search for the best marketing strategy ever. Steve Jobs presents Think Different. I've watched this a gazillion times. Steve Jobs, by the way, of course, was voted best entrepreneur of the last 100 years on CNBC. And I think it's safe to say that he knew a bit or two about how to turn around a software company. So when he came back to Apple, in his own words, he says he looked at what are the two best assets that Apple has. That's his words, not mine. He says it didn't take him long to realize that Apple's two best assets are the operating system and the brand. And again, I would encourage you to watch this. He says Apple's up there with Coca-Cola, Nike, and some of the strongest brands on the planet Earth. And he made the decision that the way to turn Apple around is to look at the two things that Apple are really, really good at and then maximize those two things. In the case of Apple, I told you it was the operating system and the brand, right? So in terms of the operating system, what he did is he had a team before he went back to Apple, the Next team, right? They built this operating system called Next Step. Let me bring it up here. Next Step. And they had spent a lot of work, a lot of time and energy building an operating system. And what Steve Jobs did is he says, well, let's take the best of this Next Step and we'll add it to Mac OS. Let's add it to Apple's operating system. I'm not sure if they called it Mac OS back then. But the funny thing is that to this day, there are elements of Next Step in every Apple computer. I think specifically with regards to the graphical user interface. In any event, if you are using an Apple computer, you are using stuff that was made by the team managed by Steve Jobs at Next Step back in the mid-90s, and it's still being used today. So they made the operating system even better, and they, with that incredible operating system, of course, went on and built the iPod, followed by the App Store, and the rest is history. I mean, last year, Apple made $5 billion profit, I believe it was, from their App Store. So certainly the operating system is a core part of this, and he was focusing on let's make that better. Now the other part was the brand, and I would really, really encourage you, take the time and watch his presentation.
Breaking some new ground.
Watch his presentation on Think Different, because he says, you know, this is a very, very busy marketplace, and we only have a short amount of time to tell people what we're about. And so he actually fired the existing marketing team that Apple had. He hired a new marketing team, and they came up with the Think Different campaign, which is, there's books about this campaign. It's widely considered the most successful marketing campaign ever. And I think it was fantastic. So that was pretty much that. And thereafter, of course, he, about a year later, hired some really great engineers and also some really good, well, he gives them the phrase executives, but about a year after, he hired Tim Cook along with some really good engineers, and they built a whole bunch of cool stuff. And that was pretty much that. But there were a few other finer details that were interesting. At the Macworld 1997 event, Steve Jobs said, you know, we have to get rid of this idea that in order for Apple to succeed, Microsoft has to fail. And so he says,
that stock price going up.
He says, I've got a special guest joining us here at the conference. And the next thing, this happens. Now, I don't know if you can hear that, but the crowd start booing. And what happened is that up until that point, Apple was involved in a whole bunch of legal disputes with Microsoft. It's difficult getting information about this, but as far as I can tell, Apple were accusing Microsoft of effectively stealing a bunch of stuff. And what happened is Steve Jobs says, I'll tell you what, Microsoft, give us $150 million and we will end these lawsuits right now, out of court, everything. And on top of that, let's get Microsoft Office onto Apple computers, and we'll even make it so that Internet Explorer is the default browser on all Apple computers. Now, he announced this at the conference, and please listen to it, and everybody's booing. But then he says, and I'll just play.
Thank you, Bill. You know, where we are right now is we're shepherding some of the greatest assets in the computer industry. And if we want to move forward and see Apple healthy and prospering again, we have to let go of a few things here. We have to let go of this notion that for Apple to win, Microsoft has to lose. Okay?
Anyway, I don't want to play any more in case I get a copyright strike. But isn't it interesting the language he uses? We are shepherding some of the, what was it he said? Some of the best. Let's have a listen.
Thank you, Bill. You know, where we are right now is we're shepherding some of the greatest assets in the computer industry.
Shepherding some of the greatest assets in the computer industry. Now, when is the last time you heard somebody talking about PHP in those terms? If you listen to the voices of the elephant, and you know, I'm not attacking anyone, I'm just telling you what I heard. Yet again, they say, yeah, well, PHP's popular, gets used by Wikipedia and Facebook. Well, not really. Whenever I hear that, I find myself screaming at the screen, and I'm like, after all these years, are we still regurgitating those crappy examples? Maybe they should phone me, you know, and just ask, hey, who have you built for? Ladies and gentlemen, I can assure you there are companies on the Dow Jones using PHP every single day to run their businesses. I know because I built some of the stuff personally. PHP monopolizes, do you hear me? Monopolizes server-side technology. It literally powers about 75% of the web. But to use Steve Jobs' language, you'd never know. You'd never know. Because when you go to YouTube, you'll see presentations like this. It now has over 1 million views. Why isn't functional programming the norm? I've quoted this one several times on this channel. And here we have an example of someone saying with a straight face that the totality of PHP equals WordPress plus Drupal. And he says, back in 2019, that PHP is more in decline than Ruby. Now, maybe that's true right now, given the crisis that PHP is going through, but it certainly wasn't true back then. And so, when I see something like this, I think, you know, I go to the comments, and I'm like, where's Fabian and the gang? How about Taylor and all of them? Where are they? And they're nowhere. PHP gets ridiculed every day, and YouTube continues to push stuff like this. Stuff that's just not accurate, and none of us say a word. Well, one person. Me. I made a video. Why isn't functional programming the norm? A retort. I only got 661 views. Didn't even get that many thumbs ups. But at least I tried. At least I tried, folks. And let me tell you something, it's very lonely when you go out into the lion's den time after time and you're the only one defending PHP. I say, just as Steve Jobs said, we need to stop being at each other's throats. Whatever your favourite framework is, you need to stop thinking that the success of that depends on the failure of some other PHP framework. And it is time for us to come together as defenders of PHP. We could really do with a pep talk right now, people. Because I think we are a community whose self-esteem is broken. Who's going to give you that pep talk? Is it going to be me? Well, here's my best shot. Do you know that if PHP was a bank, it would be closed down? It would be closed down and forced to break up into other organizations. This happened. I believe it was back in the 50s when the US government forced JP Morgan to break up. And that's when the bank Morgan Stanley was created. My lips are not working. And so we can say, we can look at the numbers, we can look at PHP's domination of server-side technology as a percent. And yes, the statement is true. If PHP was a bank, it would be broken up. Because PHP has a monopoly. Oh, hallelujah. But we have to stop being at each other's throats. I have a little framework here that is barely out of the starting blocks, and so far I've counted 165 people who have been good enough to take the time to write little posts, usually on Reddit, talking about how crap this is. The amount of personal insults I've had are ridiculous, and one of the things that comes up, funnily enough, which is not an insult, but I think it's designed to be an insult, is people have said I'm like the Terry Davis of PHP. So just to annoy them, I decided I'll put that right on the homepage of the docs here. But let's take the focus away from me. When it comes to how to build PHP apps, I don't think that I will ever agree with a solitary decision that has been put forward by the likes of PHP Fig or the Guardians of Laravel, for example. But I don't think it's helpful to continually go on and on about that. PHP is on the ropes. The future of PHP is very precarious. I am very doubtful about this strategy of let's throw money at it and everything will be okay. I'm doubtful about it for two reasons. First of all, I was top of Google for 7 years in the UK for the phrase website repairs. Now, I may not know about the core PHP stuff or anything, but I know about how to fix stuff. I've fixed thousands of apps, not all of which were even PHP. And over the years, I have acquired a kind of gut instinct. And the impression I get with PHP is that we're dealing with a Frankenstein with multiple black boxes. A Frankenstein is a word that my friends and I use for an app or a system that has lots of parts that have nothing really in common, but they've been bungled together. And a black box is a feature or a part of an app that is extremely esoteric, which means only understood by a few people. In the case of PHP, I think PHP has got at least two features that I've identified that are literally only understood by one person. If somebody came to me with an app of that scale and that dimension and said, we need to keep this thing going or fix it or something, I would be very inclined to say, start again. And funnily enough, I think that there is a legitimate case for doing just that. I happen to think that there's a legitimate case for rewriting PHP using C++ and for rewriting it in a way that is thoroughly documented and cohesive. But hey, that's me, and who cares about me? We're here to talk about Steve Jobs and what he would do if he was in charge. Well, as I said a moment ago, Steve Jobs accepted $150 million from Microsoft. This suggests to me that Steve Jobs would endorse the policy of accepting donations and funds and so on, as the foundation is doing. So I can only wish them well with that. I hope that does go well, and I hope for the best. However, I think that the real solution happens if we do as Steve Jobs did with Apple and go back to asking, what is it that made PHP successful? How did it become the most popular server-side technology on the planet Earth? And I think that if we're being honest, the answers have nothing to do with JIT compilers or benchmarks or anything like that. If we're ever going to make PHP great again, and forgive the phrase, I'm not a political guy, right? But if this is going to happen, then we're not going to do that by talking about JIT compilers or unit testing. We're going to do that by identifying PHP's strengths and focusing on those. And I would suggest that those strengths are the massive community that we've got and the convenience. This is the word that Steve Jobs would use. He wouldn't use the word easy. He would say PHP is convenient. It's convenient to go to a hosting company, give them $10, and in a few minutes, you have a holding page up. That's convenient. It's convenient that you can start some PHP code and say name is John, and immediately you have a name variable. That is convenient. And he would say, get rid of all of this aficionado stuff. Get rid of the certification. You know, the last thing we need is some white middle-aged guy marching around on stage proudly bragging about how he set the questions for the PHP exam as well as the Zen Framework exam. And again, that's not a political point. For all you, just so you know, I don't even vote. But that is precisely what's happening with PHP. And I think that it's absolutely to our detriment. I happen to think that we of the PHP community are guilty of the crime of turning our backs on developers from places like India, the Philippines, and South America. We turned our backs on them. And when you charge €250 for an exam, trust me, you are shutting out a lot of developers. And instead of shutting developers out, we should have welcomed them. And instead of focusing on some rewrite or some strict typing or some PSR thing that's totally over-engineered, we should have been building cool stuff. Instead of building something like Packagist, let's bring it up. Packagist. Now, Adam Culp, who's one of the, I think it's safe to say, well, let's just say he's heavily involved with PHP. He's on YouTube saying you should only download packages that are popular. What a terrible thing to say. Packagist kills innovation. If I was an 18-year-old genius programmer, what incentive would I have to build anything for Packagist, particularly given the fact that when you upload, you don't really get any credit, and you've got the self-appointed aficionados saying, oh, only use the stuff that's popular. They have created an ecosystem that is technically broken, that is a house of cards, and that actually discourages innovation. Personally speaking, I think I can do better than Packagist, and I have. That's why I have built the module market. I actually based it on Apple's App Store. Look at the difference. Colourful. It has a rating system, screenshots, video demos, and everything. Now, I haven't even done the formal launch video yet. Maybe it will take off, maybe it won't. I don't know. But at least I'm trying. At least I'm trying. Look at this glorious news system. One click and it's all installed. Comes with video instructions and everything. Packagist does not have that. And so, I don't want to turn this into an advert for the Trongate framework, by the way. But I think that developers should go back to focusing on building cool stuff. For example, I've showed you the module market. How about the graphical query builder?
Isn't it funny how those
Another thing I made that, as far as I can tell, nobody else has. Here it is. Look, have a look. You drag your tables in, and if you want to do an advanced table join, you join the tables, choose your join type. Look at this, and there we go. And now we show the SQL. Here it comes. So we're choosing a join type. Outer exclude, I think. Oh, actually, I don't know which one it is. But in any event, you choose the join, and look at this. You select the stuff that you want. It's so easy. And then once you've done that, you go to the top of the screen. I'll just fast forward. And you click Show SQL, and it gives you the query. That, my friends, is an example of something cool. And might I add, something that nobody else has built in the PHP community. I'm not claiming to be a genius or some marvel of modern day science, but at least I'm trying to build stuff that is cool. Stuff that makes PHP easy and, dare I say, fun. And so I have really a couple of things to say to the wider PHP community. First of all, the strategy that you have used has failed. The strategy of, like, when PHP gets ridiculed by all of those other corners of IT, academia, and all of the people who use Java, and all of the rest, all of those usual suspects, to use a Steve Jobs phrase, the solution to that ridicule is not to capitulate and say, oh, well, hang on, they're using a templating engine, so we'll use one. Folks, I have used PHP since 2003. I have read all of those articles saying it hasn't got object-oriented. Guess what? We got object-oriented. Did that stop the naysayers? Of course it didn't. They just moved on to something else. Let me tell you something that I figured out 15 years ago. PHP is not going to technologically build its way out of being ridiculed. There is no feature that you can add to PHP that is going to make the naysayers change their mind. And so, instead of capitulating and saying, oh, well, we'll just do all of the same stuff you're doing, instead of that, join me and become a defender of PHP. When you see this kind of thing, challenge it. Challenge it. Let's challenge it together. And instead of focusing on the next rewrite, or the next conference ticket, or the next aficionado rule or something, the next standard, the next PSR, how about if we focus on building really cool stuff? And if we do that, and if we go back to all of the things that made PHP successful in the first place, let me tell you something. in a very short space of time, you're going to see a whole new energy and excitement, and people are going to be saying, man, PHP is back. And when that happens, trust me, it's like the old saying, you build it and they will come. When that happens, you're not going to have to go scratching around advertising for C programmers. Instead, great talent will come to you. And you know something? You might even have some fun. So that's what Steve Jobs would do if he was in charge of the PHP Foundation. My name is David Connolly. I hope you found this useful. Thank you very much for putting up with this little thing. I'm all over the place. Let me know in the comments what you think Steve Jobs would do, and let me know what you would do. I'll catch you later.